Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for the Netflix film Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. Who among you is willing to die for what you believe in? Hello, I'm J-Law, but you can call me Justin, and if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, toys, collectibles, gaming, and all things geek-centric. Joining me for today's spoiler-free review, he's a rebel in his own right, Mr. Nate Shelton. How are you, sir?
Rebellions are built on hope.
Yeah, wrong movie,
Justin.
Wrong
What?
movie.
Are you sure? Could have fooled me.
Could have fooled a lot of people, because there is definitely some Star Wars-isms in this one. So before we begin our conversation, this is a Zack Snyder film. He is a visionary filmmaker who knows how to do the thing and make the movies in a stylistic way. I wanted to ask you before we go any further, what's one of your favorite Zack Snyder films?
I mean, shout out to Sucker Punch. I think a lot of people don't take that movie. I don't think that's his worst movie.
By
but
critics,
I think
it is, though. It's
critics,
the lowest. It's the lowest
for
Rotten Tomatoes score.
as of yet. But no, I think I would have to go with the solid 300. I think for me is the one to go for. I think sort of taking everything that Miller did with that story and adapting it into just such an epic movie that has moments that live in my mind. I think is really is fantastic, and I think it was kind of the first time that, at least for myself, that I had seen gore on that level, and sort of done in a way that still felt like it was in service to the story and not just gore as a gore fest. And so, yeah, I think that was probably, just stylistically, visually, it's the one that I always go back to. And I think that's probably my favorite Zack Snyder movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's one of my favorites for sure. I think Zack Snyder's films from his beginnings, like Dawn of the Dead, 300, and The Watchmen, are some of my favorites. Dawn of the Dead was sort of his directorial debut, if you will, zombie movies, and he reinvigorated the zombie franchise with his movie, which was a George Romero remake. It was absolutely fantastic. 300, again, showing Snyder's visual chops and what he was able to translate from Frank Miller's gorgeous graphic novel into live action, and actually adopting a lot of the same visuals, the high contrast, the sort of black and white shadows, the very it almost felt also inspired by what was successfully done from Sin City, so it still seemed to live in that same family. Watchmen, I think, is sort of the realization of his style, and then I think after that it goes style over substance, and I feel like the style's always there, but the stories, they're not really there. They're not fully fleshed out. Even there's some people that have had issues with Watchmen and how it was handled and how that story is told. But for the most part, I really enjoyed that. But I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of his work in the Snyderverse. Again, stylistically, what he was able to bring visually, I appreciated, but narratively, I think that those movies were a little fumbly. But yeah, I would say I think Watchmen is kind of like the peak for me in terms of that marriage of storytelling and stylistic filmmaking, if you will. But yeah.
Also, shout out to Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole.
Yeah, it's almost like a kid's movie. Have you seen it?
No, have you?
No, I haven't seen. That's the only one I haven't seen. I actually might watch that one.
We should watch that one.
Yeah, I
think it actually looks pretty good.
I think it's more of a kid's movie, but I also saw some clips from it that, again, he's able to bring his Snyder style to it, like the
To the
slow-mo,
world of animation.
the real
Yeah.
like close-ups of things happening, and the way action is sort of blocked in his movies. There seems to be a real focus on that. But it does, I honestly, I hadn't heard of it until I did a deep dive into his filmography, and I was like, damn, that's the only movie I haven't seen in this I saw a movie that he made on an iPhone, which was a short film, and that was
Yeah.
incredibly stunning, and it was shot on an iPhone. So, when we're talking about Zack Snyder, we know we're getting good stylistic filmmaking,
Yeah.
competent, strong, visually stunning filmmaking. But I digress, because we're going to talk about this movie, and we're going to talk about that marriage of filmmaking and storytelling. Let's get into introducing this movie. There's actually two synopsises. I got a franchise synopsis,
Okay.
and then a actual movie synopsis. So let me start off with the franchise synopsis for Rebel Moon. From Zack Snyder, the filmmaker behind 300, Man of Steel, and Army of Dead, comes Rebel Moon, an epic science fantasy event decades in the making. When a peaceful settlement on a moon in the furthest reaches of the universe find itself threatened by the armies of tyrannical Regent Balisarius, Korra, a mysterious stranger living among the villagers, becomes their best hope for survival, tasked with finding trained fighters who will unite with her in making an impossible stand against the Mother World. Korra assembles a small band of warriors, outsiders, insurgents, peasants, orphans of war from different worlds who share a common need for redemption and revenge, as the shadow of the entire realm bears down on the unlikeliest of moons. A new army of heroes is formed. Whoa. Right?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
just the franchise synopsis. Now,
Okay. What's the movie one?
now, okay, here is the synopsis for the movie that we are reviewing, called Rebel Moon Part 1: A Child of Fire.
Okay.
After crash landing on a moon in the furthest reaches of the universe, Korra, a stranger with a mysterious past, begins a new life among a peaceful settlement of farmers. But she soon becomes their only hope for survival when the tyrannical Regent Balisarius and his cruel emissary, Admiral Noble, discover the farmers have unwittingly sold their crops to the Blood Axes, leaders of the
Oh.
fierce group of insurgents hunted by the Mother World, tasked with finding fighters who would risk their lives to defend the people of Veld. Korra and Gunnar, a tender-hearted farmer, naive in realities of war, journey to different worlds in search of the Blood Axes and assemble a small band of warriors who share a common need for redemption along the way. Kai, a pilot and a gun for hire, General Titus, a legendary commander, Nemesis, a master swordswoman, Tarek, a captive with a regal past, and Milas, a resistance fighter. Back on Veld, Jimmy, an ancient mechanized protector hiding in the wings, awakens with a new purpose. But the newly formed revolutionaries must learn to trust one another and fight as one before the armies of the Mother World come to destroy them all. Holy hell. This
Justin,
is
when you like when somebody sits down and everyone's at the table and they're all like, "We're gonna play a new board game," and they pull the rules out. They start
I just went
reading.
through 2 sets of rules. I'm telling you.
Bro, I gotta go home. My time's up here. That's it. Holy. It's a
Now
lot.
this movie stars Sophia Boutella, Jaimin Onsu, Ed Skrein, Michael Hussman, Duna Bay, Ray Fisher, and Charlie Hunnam, along with Anthony Hopkins, Stas Nair, Cleopatra Coleman, E. Duffy, and Fra Fee. Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, will debut on Netflix December 21st. So tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Time and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you'll be able to enjoy that tonight. A huge thanks to our friends at Netflix and Netflix Canada for inviting us out to the LA premiere and to see this movie on the big screen, because we did get to see it in theaters. So that is the basis of our review for today. So let's get into sharing our thoughts about Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. I got some pillars, like I always do. Right, we're gonna
You
start by
love
talking
pillars,
about,
dude.
I love my pillars. It gives us focus. So like I got performances down, I got visual effects, and then I got story. Now, as we usually do, we will talk about what works and what didn't work for both. I am going to kick things off really quick here and talk about the performances. I think the performances in this were top notch. I think the cast delivers compelling portrayals that left me with a lasting impression. However, this is where we get into the doesn't work. The
That was
film,
quick.
yeah, exactly. The film, the problem is in its inability to afford adequate screen time
Hmm.
for these characters, preventing me as an audience member or anyone to fully grasp motives and intention for each of these characters. Uh, Cora, played by Sophia, is very much on a mission. We and she's rounding up these different warriors, as the synopsis said, and different from different walks of life that have been, hurt by the mother world, but we don't really get the sense of understanding how and why. So like this, the performances were really great, but what I feel like is that the narrative rushes to set the stage so hard for future stories, and potentially, well, we know that there is a R-rated or Snyder cut version that's in the shadows, and so character development feels like it sort of takes a back seat. um but it becomes apparent that each of these characters, there's such depth to them that we just don't know. They know something that we don't know. And unfortunately, this movie doesn't really elaborate on it. There are some characters that really aren't given the time and focus that they should, given maybe their importance in this movie overall. I don't want to get into spoilers, obviously, because we're staying spoiler free, but there is one specific character that there's a bit of a twist, and I'm just kind of like, I wish we had set that up a little bit more. We could have seen that sort of unravel, so we could sit with it a little bit more, or it would impact us. It By the time it ends up happening, it was just kind of like, oh,
Yeah, I think you can very much see where the emphasis lies in terms of what Zach as a storyteller has for this movie in terms of his focus, and also by the way the cast is styled and even how they perform for what opportunities they do get to perform. I think Sophia is sweaty the entire movie, right? You can see her hyper focus on her performance through her physicality,
yeah,
and I think the solid 2 months of training that they went through really shows in the movie, and I think in the way she carries herself, and the way that sort of she focuses the character of Cora, and especially in the action sequences. I think for me, honestly, I like all the players in this cast. I
yeah,
really enjoy them. I loved Jaimin Anzu. I think is fantastic. I love Anthony Hopkins, who's in this movie, believe it or not. And I think again, there's so many elements here that I really enjoy, but like you said, we don't really get the time to spend with them. I think Cora and Noble, Ed Skrine's character, are probably the two that we do get the most out of, and they're diametrically opposed, but they definitely serve their roles well in the
well,
film.
yeah,
I think Ed is a great villain actor.
yeah,
Like I
he's
do think he's
so
a
good.
fantastic villainous guy. I
Yeah,
hated him. I wanted
yeah,
to hate him, and I did. And I think they at least achieved that. You can see that he's a bad guy right from the moment he walks off of the ship on the farming planet at the beginning of the movie. Like you instantly know what this guy is about, and that stays true throughout the entirety of the movie. I can't quite say that there's um, a massive amount of like growth for his character,
but
but
it's
what he delivers, if that makes
right.
sense.
No, for sure. And that's exactly it. This cast does deliver with what they're given for part one,
Right.
right? And I think that, to your point, Sophia, absolutely fantastic. She is a hero you want to root for. She is so badass, and she really does lean into the action pieces so, like, with her whole heart and her whole
Hmm.
body in a lot of ways, right? And yeah, Ed is the perfect villain. You love to hate him. And even there's this really great scene, as you said, like our first introduction with him with Corey Stahl, and that is such a great scene where we get to understand Noble's motives and how he works, and it was just so telling. So I thought
Hmm.
that was a really really great moment. And like you said, like Jaimin was fantastic. He's great in everything he does. I love Staz, who plays
Hmm.
Tarek. He was so great. Again, another character I want to see. Charlie Hunnam was good. I thought he was great. Again, more exploration with his character would have been fantastic as Kai. Um, and we had Nemesis, the swordswoman, who was like
Yeah.
so badass, and again just another character that was sort of cool but we don't explore. So again, I know we're talking about a part one, but this movie, and as we go through, I think we're going to kind of come back to it. It's hindered by this part one mentality, and potentially even this mentality of a R-rated Snyder cut that is in the shadows. To have another cut that apparently is an hour long,
Yeah.
is this where we're going to get more of that story growth, and is that where we're going to start to say, oh, okay, this is actually enjoyable?
It brings up the argument of like, well, why didn't we just watch that movie? But I think going
100%.
back to this movie
Yeah.
that we did watch, I do think the action sequences, and more specifically the combat scenes, are the standout positive for me as far as from a performance standpoint as well. I think Sophia, and I think Duna did a phenomenal job, and their respective stunt teams did an amazing job delivering those moments. And I think those are the moments that definitely had me saying, like, oh, that's really cool. Like
Yeah.
that was a cool moment. But like you were saying, Justin, like this movie's 2 hours and 13 minutes long, and I can't say that was the majority of my experience, unfortunately. I think, again, like we're talking, like this cast just doesn't get a chance to shine, and there could have been so much more done to make us love their characters, and that's not on their performance, but it's on the writing. And
Well,
it
yeah,
just kind of got me asking myself, like, as I was watching the movie, because I knew going in that he was trying to go for the seven samurai aspect.
for
But
sure.
it's like at a certain point, I'm like, why are there so many of them? Back to back to back to back. We don't need a team this big that we need to follow. You could have spent more time fleshing out a smaller group of maybe three, maybe four characters. But the
Yes.
fact that we had to have like six or seven, I never got to get to know really any of them. I didn't really care about any of them. And the majority of the story is told through exposition, not even from the characters themselves, but through, there's again, without spoiling anything, but there is a moment where a single character just delivers the backstory of each character back to back, and it felt silly and it felt cheap, and it's the movie is just too overstuffed in that sense,
Yeah.
and it definitely does a disservice to this otherwise excellent cast.
Exactly. This story doesn't allow this cast to really shine. But again, there's part two and part three, and who knows what that's going to look like. But this should really set that tone. Like we talk about a part one really establishing, motives and intent, not just for characters, but for what future stories are going to bring. I don't know if that necessarily that this really came off. And also just want to point out, like, there's a part in the synopsis for the actual movie that I read where it references, Jimmy, voiced by Anthony Hopkins, an ancient mechanized protector hiding in the wings, awakens with a new purpose. We didn't see that.
What was that?
What was that? Like
When did
that.
that happen?
So to me, that is something that I've just read that I believe is in whatever extended cut we will get with an
100%.
hour
Yeah.
extra footage. So,
Yeah.
the R-rated version, if that's the version that Snyder put all of his, his marbles into, then I want to see that one. Like that's the one I
Hmm.
want to be talking about right now. Like,
Yeah.
let's go, cuz I want to see how crazy he gets and how weird he gets, because he's in interviews he's been talking about it. um you know Apart from the acting, let's talk about the visual effects. You already kind of touched on one aspect, and that is the choreography and the fighting.
Hmm.
I'd also see that as a bit of a visual effects in terms of the way the camera work moves through these fight scenes. Again, this is where Snyder shines.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Snyderisms. There's the slow mo. There's the epic moments. There's the shallow depth of
The
field.
the
There's
light bleed everywhere.
the lens flares are
Lens
crazy, and
flares
that's
all over
more
the place.
of like a sci-fi thing that he is just going crazy with. It's almost like J.J. Abrams on the first Star Trek movie. He just went
Yeah.
nuts with lens flares. But it also has a lot to do with the lenses that he's using. Like he
Mm.
is shooting digital. This is the second film shooting digital. He's using anamorphic lenses that yield more of that lens flare and that aesthetic. So it's giving it a more cinematic scope. And I think, again, this is where there's some positives. The positives are very high. The only thing is that I would say is a negative is some CGI kind of took me out. Like there were
Mm.
some CGI moments that felt very unfinished or unpolished, and they were just kind of thrown in for the sake of it. So I was a little taken back by some of that. I was actually surprised in some instances. But if we're talking about a visual filmmaker with the strength of Zack Snyder, this is where he shines. Is in the visuals.
Yeah, I think the some of those special effects that you're referring to, there were some moments that reminded me of cut scenes that I would see on like a random sci-fi first-person shooter on Xbox 360. Like
Mhm.
and like not in a good way, right? Like in a way that it did take me out. There are definitely moments of, again, huge action or big epic slow-mo that we get that are the Snyder signature work. But the only thing I'll say is like the first few times that there was like the slow mo and like the crazy lighting and everything, I was like kind of delighted by it, and I'm like, oh, cool. Like it gave me a bit of a almost a nostalgic feeling for some of his previous work. And then like just throughout the movie, it just started getting really annoying. To be honest with you, there were just so many moments that just sort of took me out of the moment, and just again, massive shots are great on a big movie theater screen, but I never found that there was anything that sort of stuck with me. And I also want to bring that over to the visuals in terms of creature design and character design.
Yes.
I think maybe like there was maybe one alien that I was like, that actually looks really cool, which was there's this alien that puppets a human being, and I thought that was kind of an original
Mhm.
cool idea. Like I'm like, that's really neat. Um, but but honestly, every alien or animal just kept reminding me of other universes that I would prefer to be in. Like there's essentially a hippogriff in the movie.
Mhm.
There's a well designed but unoriginal alien guy that looks like he's from Halo. And then there's straight up Urukai from Lord of the Rings. Like there are legitimately Urukai in this movie. Why?
Mhm.
What are they doing there? How'd they get there? Why? Why are there Urukai in this movie? Like I kept expecting like Saruman to show up or something. Like I don't know. I think the idea of adapting or paying homage is one thing, but you have to have a creative and more original story to distract me from the fact that I'm constantly being reminded of a property that I'd rather be watching. Right.
Right.
And there, there's a cantina scene where we meet Charlie Hunnam's character, who's pretty much Han Solo. Like he's the
Yeah.
pilot that helps them get off
Well,
planet.
let's
And I
yeah.
get that. Like I trust me, huge Star Wars fan. I love the idea that we have Star Wars fans making movies that pay homage to Star Wars,
This
but
feels
but you
cheap to
got to
you.
do more. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to
And
do
it
more. This
it
is
well,
and
what I'm
ugh,
getting from you is that it feels cheap, and it feels like it's just an obvious sort of like lackadaisical sort of half-assed effort to try to, again, pay homage, but just not really doing much in terms of that.
it doesn't
I think it
grow
is.
it.
I do think that it should be made aware that this, well, from rumors, I don't think there's any real confirmation, but this was pitched to Lucasfilm prior to the Disney acquisition. Zack Snyder did take this idea of doing a Star Wars movie on this scale, and I
Hmm.
think you can see a lot of the pieces of in this movie where the Empire would fit in, and how their story would unfold, and
This was
Korra
like
maybe.
an alternate universe, Force Awakens.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
even just the sentiments of Rebel Moon is just it speaks Star Wars in a lot of ways.
sure.
Like I don't disagree with you, but I think that was the least of my concerns, was how obvious and how straightforward his adaptations from other source material. Like you brought up, the Seven Samurai, which he sourced as an inspiration.
Yeah.
Star Wars, as you sourced. This film does feel like a mixed bag of a bunch of other sci-fi fantasy movies that for better or worse, did it better than what's being done here.
Yeah,
That said, the lore and the sort of quality of the story, the design of certain things, it is hard in this day and age to pull off something that can holistically be original without audiences connecting with it and saying, "Oh, this reminds me of this reminds me of that."
sure.
Even if it is there literally because Snyder was like, "Oh yeah, I want to throw that in there," or because it's just a coincidence. I think we live in an age where, films remix upon each other. They adopt things that they like, they pay homage. But to your point, it's the taste and class in which it's done. And if it feels cheap and it feels like it's just for the sake of doing it, then it kind of takes away from the whole idea of, paying homage. It just feels like a sort of a way to say, hey, remember this, we're going to throw that in there and kind of keep you hooked, because we got some of that as well as that Star Wars has, or
And that's
Guardians
fine.
of the Galaxy or
If
something.
there's a good enough story
Hmm.
that feels separate enough from what I've experienced before, then I can be distracted
Hmm.
from the fact that there's straight up urukai in the movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that sentiments, let's get to our final pillar, and that is story. As we've been talking about kind of throughout, this this story feels very stinted or overstuffed because of that part one element that is attached to it, and the way we very rapidly move through moments and scenes. We don't really get to live with any of them, right? Like
Hmm.
we're meant to understand characters' motives and, what's driving them, yet we don't really get to feel that. It sort of comes off hollow and very surface, which I think is such a huge detriment to what Snyder's trying to do with this franchise. And as a
Hmm.
first movie, I don't know if it's the best way to kick things off, if you will. Apart from the visuals and establishing some great performances from characters, it's just, it feels very light for a part
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, I said rebellions are built on hope. And I hoped this movie would be great when we saw the trailers. The
Mhm.
trailers are great. I'll be honest
Oh
with you.
yeah.
I was like, that trailer looked awesome. I wanted this movie to be great. I think the idea of someone taking on the classic John Campbell hero's journey and the tropes and ideas from legendary Japanese cinema, while giving us heroes and space battles and
Talking
new
about Star Wars?
aliens and new planets. It sounds like Star Wars, right? But the idea that we could get something like that wasn't Lucasfilm, that wasn't Disney, and could go mature and could
And
go dark
edgier.
and could go
Yeah.
edgy, right? Could go
Yeah.
300 with it.
Give me
Sounds,
that R-rated Snyder cut
dude,
version, right?
it sounds awesome. And I was really intrigued to see what Zack Snyder would deliver, but I'm so bummed with what we got. I think again, the majority of the movie, like we were saying, it's let's get the gang together to fight the big bad empire, and that's not a movie. That's a section of a sci-fi movie.
Exactly.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? That's
Yeah,
not a whole
exactly.
movie.
This is,
So
and that's a great way to look at
and
it.
that's
Yeah.
that might be what this is, right? That might be a section of his overall vision for what the movie really will be when the extended cut is done. And I don't know if it's like a marketing thing at this point, with the idea of like, oh, the Snyder cut is always better than the original, right?
Well,
With
he
Justice League and what have you. But I
yeah.
just think like, I don't know. I just there was they moved from moment to moment, and I never really understood why these characters wanted to help them, who any of these characters really were, and then to get like sort of just a scene where a character is just spouting off exposition one after the other. It just again, it rubbed me the wrong way, and I just wasn't having fun, and that's
It's
ridiculous for a
yeah.
sci-fi epic movie of this scale. Like I should at least be having fun with it.
For sure, and I think that this movie is very style first, story second,
Yeah,
or third in many cases, I guess. You
sure.
know what I mean? I think that, and again, it's a disservice to the performances that we get from the fantastic cast that just don't really get that time to shine. But to your point, this idea of an alternative cut, but there was a conversation in and around the extended cut versus what was being showcased on Netflix, and he definitely refers to it as more of the R-rated cut with an hour of extra footage, which is nuts. Do you know what I mean? Like that's you might as well just call that your Snyder cut. But the fact that there's an hour of additional footage in this additional cut for part one, an R-rated version, like, again, like you said, that's the version of this movie that I want to see,
Yeah.
that's going to really push up against what's being done, right? The whole concept of what this movie is adopting, from the Seven Samurai, from the Star Wars esque to the Guardians esque sort of vibes, to just this idea of like a hero's journey. Give me that R-rated version, give me that intense version. I think that's the version that that this movie deserves. That would work better, I think, for the audience. But that said, I understand Netflix has a audience, and they've sort of built this into, and I believe he talked about this, is that Netflix sort of built that into the agreement of doing these movies, is that there would be an alternative cut, maybe
So it's
because
a
the
marketing
Snyder,
thing for sure.
it's probably is a marketing thing, but I guess it also has a lot to do with how well the Snyder cut of Justice League did
Yeah,
in relation
exactly.
to that. But that's a 4-hour movie, right? Like, are
Hmm.
we just going to get a movie at the end of this that's just going to be called Rebel Moon, and it's just all three parts smashed together? I don't
Are they
think
doing three
so.
parts or two parts?
I'm pretty sure it's a 3-part story.
Whoa.
But this is where I'm kind of confused, and I didn't actually ask for clarification and while I was in LA and talking to people, but I was under the impression at first that this part one and part two that we're getting is actually part one together
Oh
of a
no.
3-part story.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's the case.
Right.
But if anyone does know, please let us know. Throw you the tags and how you can reach out to us at the end. But that to me in itself, just the sort of uncertainty of how this franchise is structured, makes me a little uneasy about where we're going and what direction we're going in.
Yeah, and I just one more thing in regards to the story of this film. Um
Oh, geez, you beat it with a stick
I
already, man. Come
listen,
on.
dude,
I'm
I
just
need to
joking.
mention one more thing though, and it's
Yeah.
there's no humor in the movie. Like you want me to connect with, our troubled past farmer protagonist, then just give them something. Or give us a character that can have a little bit of jokes. I think they attempted it with Charlie Hunnam's character. I think maybe in one scene or the other. I don't know. It was kind of blurring together for me, but
There's a lot of scenes with him that I am anticipating are going to be in that extended cut, because he
right.
was extremely light in this movie.
And it's just like, I get that the world is threatened by a bunch of space Nazis and that's bad, but like, just there's so much self-seriousness in this movie that it just started to kind of, again, it goes from sort of being like intense to almost being tiring to a certain degree, where you're seeing these characters trudging from one planet to the next, collecting these heroes and hearing just how horrible and terrible everything is for everyone, but not really seeing that. And it's all explained in like 5 minutes of dialogue for each character. It's just, again, I don't understand why we had to have so many of them. They're cool to look at, but there's just
We
not much there to get behind them.
we
And
had
I
so
I don't
many,
know.
yeah, for sure. But I think we had so many of them so that all the legwork was done in part one, and number two, as he's described, I believe in this might have been with Brandon Davis's. If the first one is about getting the band together, the second one is full on war, is what he says. So
Okay.
if there's
And still
that's
not
his
getting to
intention.
know who they actually are.
Well, see, the thing is that, like, there's a mixture of footage that's been seen in trailers and things that he has photographed and shown on his Twitter and or on
Hmm.
his social, that show that there is going to be a bit of a dive into these characters and their history.
Yeah.
But I would have appreciated that up front rather
Hmm.
than figuring it out along the way, because I feel like that's going to get exposition heavy. I do feel like there's going to be a little bit of a Watchmen sort of vibe to how we move around and we learn about these stories of these characters and we move through time. I think what we got here didn't necessarily work for us entirely. There's aspects of it. There's good bones and good potential, but how it will land is really on the basis of a part two and a part three, or
And a
however
part
many
one
parts
and a
there
half
are.
with the
There's an
six.
animated series apparently. There's
Okay.
there's a lot of stuff to kind of explore. He is fleshing this out to be a franchise. So,
But
you know
this
what?
industry,
Let's
like this industry, is not patient. Like it's not patient. You know what I mean? Like you can't just put this out and be like, just wait. I promise it'll get better. Like
for
it's
sure. I definitely
people don't
agree,
get
but like,
invested in that.
but then again, it's like, why put out again, we as we keep coming back to, like, why
Yeah.
do we have this cut, and then in 2 months maybe we're going to have a extended Snyder cut
Well,
that's
we'll
R
revisit it
rated.
then. See if it gets a
I'd
higher
be
score.
happy to if you'd be down. I would
Yeah,
love
I'm down.
to revisit it because hopefully our sentiments will change. Well, look, I think we've finished part one.
Of our
Let's
conversation. We're
of
gonna
our
put out an
conversation.
extended cut of this. It's gonna be 4 hours long. It's gonna be way better.
Oh man. Okay, well, with that said, let's get into our final thoughts and our score, which will be out of 1 to 5. Bennu, which is a mythical creature similar to a griffin that is featured in this movie.
Hmm.
Nate, you're my only co-host today.
I thought you were gonna say my only hope.
Nate, you are my only hope. Why don't you give me why don't you kick things off with your final thoughts and score?
I really wanted to like this movie, as I said. I think, we're talking about it. The bones for a fresh take on these ideas and these themes that have been set by our beloved galaxy far, far away. They're all there. The cast, I think, again, is a great cast. But like, if you walk away sort of like being like, I don't get what's so great about them, it's like, well, watch them in other movies and you'll understand because we just don't get enough of them here. When we're spending the majority of the movie sort of frustrated by the lack of character depth and a story that just feels like so many that I've already heard. Unfortunately, the flashy visuals and the signature Snyder slow motion and even the badass action sequences, which again, if you just want to watch a supercut of those action sequences, they're great, they're awesome, but they're not enough to keep me engaged in this story and in this world. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what the director's cut will be. As we said, I hope it can make up for the huge lack of depth in this version of the story. But for now, I'm sad to say I'm giving Rebel Moon Part One, A Child of Fire, 2 out of 5 hippogriffs. I mean Ben News or whatever.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, not awesome, but
No.
I'm with you. I think Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon is a visual feast. It does have that signature Snyderism visual style, whether you love or hate it. It has all the stylistic choices you've come to associate with the director. The film, however, bites off a lot more than it can chew in its ambitious first installment. And while it's undeniably a massive achievement in terms of crafting a wholly original world, it's not a wholly original story, as you mentioned. There is a lot of interesting mythical lore, but the film's eagerness to set up future narrative is a detriment to this movie in a lot of ways. Like you said, the performances are great, but we just don't get to spend enough time with these characters. The bones, the structure is there from the stories we know and love of Star Wars, but let's go edgy, let's go dark, let's go gory, let's make it more adult and break the rules that probably Star Wars wouldn't allow Zack Snyder to break.
Hmm.
They would have held him back. But like we were saying, the narrative feels overstuffed, juggling numerous plot lines that dilute the overall experience. I think Snyder's spectacle does shine through, but the weak storytelling detracts from the film's potential of being a great part one. And despite these shortcomings, Rebel Moon, it's far from Snyder's worst work, but it's definitely not his best work. I think the film is definitely hindered on by that part one, but also by the potential of an alternate cut that promises to have more story to tell. That very much takes away from the viewing experience, as you can tell that there's things that are obviously not included in this that could have helped to elaborate on elements for the story. And I think that he's a visionary filmmaker who knows how to make movies, like a James Cameron, like a Michael Bay, but like those directors as well, their style is more important than the actual substance. Their stories always suffer. It's sort of this thing where you appreciate them for their technical capabilities, but you understand when you're going into their movies, you're not going to get the best story. So as it stands, I think Rebel Moon Part 1 is a testament to Snyder's ability to create visually stunning worlds, but yet this film does fall short of being an epic Part 1. With the idea of an alternative cut and a Part 2 out there, that hinders on this experience. So I'm going to be giving this film a 2.5 out of 5 Bennu, because it's only half of a movie, and
That's
it's
half the
like
score.
it's half the score.
There you go.
I admire Snyder. I've enjoyed his work.
Yeah.
He's inconsistent, but there's one thing that's certain about him as a filmmaker. He is a visionary, which is why I will always show up for Zack Snyder films, even if they are leaving me wanting more. So yeah, 2.5 out of 5. Well, that is it for our spoiler-free review for Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. Again, a huge thanks to our friends at Netflix, for bringing me out to LA to see this movie,
Absolutely.
and sending you to in Toronto here, Nate, to see it in theater. It was great to actually see this movie in theater so we could get that full scale and scope of Snyder's vision. But hey, if you want to let us know what you think of the movie once it drops on Netflix tonight, or if you get a chance to see it in theaters, feel free to reach out to us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or you can reach out to us on Instagram at wearegeekcentric, or on Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now known as X, but at Geekcentric YT. Keep in mind, as we've mentioned, there are some interviews that are out right now. I was lucky enough, as I mentioned, to go to LA to see this movie in the Chinese theater as the part of the Hollywood premiere. Went to the after party, and then the next day I got to sit and talk with the cast and director Zack Snyder about this movie. And in those interviews, I really focus on each of these actors finding their character and how they connected with it. Because again, as we mentioned, they were sort of the highlight, even though the story did a disservice to them. They were the highlight. They are the reason why I'd probably come back and want to see more of this story, to see what's next. And I also had a chance, like I said, to talk to Zack Snyder, ask him some questions about his influences from past work, and also taking on so many roles. Because as I mentioned, he's writer, producer, director, and cinematographer for Rebel Moon. So those are available on youtube.com/geekcentric. They're also available as a massive supercut on all podcast feeds. There, Nate and I kind of chat a little bit more about that experience in LA, what it was like, given that was the first time any of us from Geekcentric have been invited to a Hollywood premiere. So that was really, really great. But we also have a ton of other episodes out now for you to enjoy, including our special Behind the Geeks episode with the cast of Percy Jackson, also available on youtube.com/geekcentric. We also have our spoiler-free reviews for A24 and Elevation Pictures' The Iron Claw, Netflix's Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, Netflix's film Leave the World Behind. We also have a spoiler-free review for The Boy and the Heron, and for Netflix's animated series, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. This is it for us, I think. There is maybe one other thing, but we're like really close to the deadline here. We might have some What If season 2 stuff.
What if we did,
really.
Justin?
What if we did, or what if we didn't? We're still waiting on what that looks like. But this has been, if this is our last review, a huge thanks to everyone who's joined us this year, who's continued to stay with us. We are so grateful because of the opportunity that we got to go to do this premiere. Has a lot to do with listeners like you tuning in, joining us, and listening to our thoughts and us rant and ramble about the things we love, whether it be movie reviews, or if we're fortunate enough to sit with other people and chat with them about what they do. We are grateful for everyone who's been with us, and we can't wait for 2024. We're hoping we can amp things up, whatever that might look like. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But from us to you, happy holidays. We wish you the best. Nate, thank you for joining me for this spoiler-free review. And as we say,
Love ya.
peace.